Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Sunday Podcast, presented by sportsshoes.com. I'm Ollie Lum.
And I'm Matt Seddon.
This podcast is all about elite distance running in the UK.
We're here to give you all the latest news updates around the sport,
as well as weekly interviews with athletes and coaches.
Stay up to date by following us on Instagram and X at Sunday Podcast.
And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel too, where we post athlete workout videos, shoe reviews and more.
Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy the episode.
Okay, hello, welcome back to another episode. As you can see from the title, this week's a bit scientific. We've got Josh Rowe from Maurten to speak about some of their products, and it's not just a sales pitch. He's chatting about maybe the technology and also some of the kind of benefits of carbohydrate intake, as I'm sure you're all aware of, for kind of marathon running and then maybe some shorter events as well. So we'll get into that later on, won't we, Matt? But how are you first of all, mate?
Very well, thank you, buddy. Getting ready for a big weekend. What we on the eve of Highgate Night of Tens, so looking forward to commentating there. And yeah, we'll probably try and bring a review episode out to you guys early next week as well, because I think a lot's going to go down. But other than that, mate, I mean, just catching up. I mean, it's that time of year where people are performing, it seems like every night, and phones blowing up last night. Keely ran 51.1 for a 400. And look, we used to say, distance running, guilty of people going to like really low key obscure tracks. But I mean, I think there was a grandstand where Keely raced, but British 400 guy as well. Dobson ran 44, so it seemed like a really quick track somewhere remote on the coast of Italy. It looked like an awesome track, but it did look awfully low key as well. So it's not just distance runners who are seeking these hot spots, perfect weather storms to go run fast.
Yeah, and then obviously on a distance front as well, don't think we've released an episode since Phoebe Gill ran that 157. I think that came out just after we recorded last week. So phenomenal run, and that's got to be the one of the week. But like I say, Keely's responded. It's an exciting time for that women's 800. But every year it seems like another name's thrown in the hat for that team. We've got Keely and Riki. You've got to say are the two, but Phoebe Gill now, like if she's run 157 already, where can she go like this year? And then not even just this year, where can she go in the next like 4 years?
Yeah, it's quite scary, really. I mean, she put 4 seconds on Boffey and Baker in the same race. Sorry, Ellie Baker in the same race, and it was Erin Wallace, wasn't it? Who ran 2 flat. Getting a bit mixed up with the Diamond League, but yeah, I was just like, that was just, and the way she ran it, and like it was just, mate, it was Max Bergen-esque, wasn't it? So I think if she look, it's very different running a time there than it is running a time, being able to perform at British champs and stuff, getting pushed around and shoved, like it is very different. And I've always said, like, I actually feel like running 800-meter races in that setting where you just feel good, the weather's clearly very good, and you're off the front, and there's no one blocking. Like Radisha was a master at it. There's no one blocking his rangy stride, and she's similar, mate. Her stride is massive, and I just feel like that's almost like a perfect race for her in that sense. So, but you hope she's got more to give, and if she has got more to give, Jesus, like if she ends up running 156 this year, something crazy, like
You're medaling, or you're in with a shot of a medal. You can run 156.
Yeah, well, I think with the big three at the moment, and then you've got the level of experience that some of the Americans have, and you got Natoya Gall, haven't you, and people like that. I think it is tough to say that you're medaling, but yeah, you're definitely in with a chance. And I do think, if you're a British 800-meter runner right now, female side, you go, oh God, as if it wasn't already hard enough. There's now another person in the mix.
I think the thing is, though, yeah, I agree with that in that you're not obviously guaranteed of a medal, or you're not like maybe shooting for a medal, but I think as well, if you make that British team, the confidence you're going to have. Say she runs 156 and you make that team, you're kind of in the battle with Keely and Riki at the British champs. You then know you're close. Whereas if you're running this and you're from another nation, for example, like, yeah, you might run a time, but actually your trials is quite easy. But pitch yourself against Keely at British Champs, and then you know like what world class is or top of the world is.
Yeah, 100%. And so yeah, I guess that was the big result. There were many other results as well. The 1500 was good. On the men's side, it was a bit of a sit and kick as well. There were a few 3Ks. And actually on the men's side on the 800, I mean, that was impressive as well. Callum Dodds, 144, Tom Randolph running fast as well. Like I just thought, Jesus, So Matt Yates, hope you're listening because yeah, credit where it's due. Meslek's off to a pretty good start to the season. Callum Dodds as well seems to be absolutely flying.
Mm, absolutely, and it's about time we see some of these 800 guys like we see more 144s. I think because I think the 800 has just been. I think it's fair to say that like times wise anyway, across the world, not talking about Brits, it's just been weak for a few years now. And I think it's about time that we start seeing a lot more 144s, so that we can start seeing 143s,
Hmm.
142s,
Hmm.
because we're still like the Rudisha's 140 still seems like a ridiculously unattainable standard for athletes like over 10 years later.
Mm. No, you're dead right. And actually, on the likes of, I mean, Callum Dodds, I haven't really seen him train, but Elliot Giles is YouTube, by the way. It's kind of maybe we'll make a content of the week category because his YouTube is very good and very insightful, at least to South Africa. The vlogs that he was putting out, he was ripping some nasty sessions, and someone who was featuring in a lot of those sessions was Tom Randolph, and even looking at him then, I was like, God, these boys are going to run something silly. Um, as well. And Giles obviously got his season off to a good 1500 start. Ran okay in 800 recently. I think he ran 146 the other night, which isn't amazing for him. But so yeah, so I think he's going to start to shape that decision what he chooses to go for at trials, and we'll continue to speculate. But and then a few other results, mate, from Germany. In Karlsruhe, Phil Norman. I mean, he's been in fine form anyway. Couple of 2Ks. 5:25.0 over 2K, and then a few days later goes and runs 8:21.0. So over the steeple, of course. So the man just, doing what he does and turns up on Olympic year. I mean, he's strong anyway, when it's not Olympic year, but yeah, he's looking in a very good position to try and get that 8:18.5. And Mark Pierce as well, 8:27. So good. I think saw Luke Gunn say that was his fastest time in a couple of years. So talk about the depths on the 800. It's good to know the depths on the steeples kind of coming back as well after kind of, I guess, a little blip the last year or two.
Yeah, almost since the last Olympics, really. Obviously, we sent
I
two
think so.
to two to Tokyo,
I
Norman
think
and Steven, but
it always helps when there's a Europeans. For
mm,
so many of our athletes, and look, like we talk about the 800 as well. Like I think it's no coincidence that we're seeing people like Dodds and Randolph and people like that who are, yes, Olympics is kind of maybe their A goal, but they're definitely a goal which is attainable is the Euros.
yeah, I think that's a great point, mate. I do think that having that kind of stepping stone or not even a fullback really. It's like shoot for the Euros time, and if you get yourself in that environment, like who knows what can happen like after you've done that, and you can almost run a bit more free. Like you got your Euro standards, so you know that you're in with a shot of that. Now you can just start going for it a bit more.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Right, I think that's about it in terms of results. So let's crack into this episode with Josh Rowe. It was brilliant to chat with him. Super knowledgeable guy about the product. I can't remember his exact job title. He does say in the podcast, so kind of I won't butcher that. But he's essentially a scientist for Maurten, doing some research and kind of ensuring their products keep improving, and also developing new ones as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, we'll get straight into that and enjoy the episode. Okay, firstly, Josh, just thanks for coming on and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, and thanks for having me on. Looking at the roster has been on previously. It's yeah, I feel pretty lucky to be on. So thank you.
Oh no, not at all. Thank you very much. Do you mind just telling us a bit about Maurten, like kind of an overview? Because obviously you're working there. I'm sure we'll get into kind of your role. But it seems like it's been around on the market for a long time now. But actually, it's only 2015.
Yeah. So I think the initial idea came out like 2016, and yeah, it's been pretty quite a humble but crazy story really for from Maurten's front. So they very much it started off from a researcher called Maurten and the CA a Lost Gold, and the Maurten kind of went to his dentist, and he was at the time kind of training for Ironman and doing a lot of kind of endurance kind of events, and his dentist kind of just said to him like he could tell he was kind of taking part in these sports and consuming loads of sports drinks and gels just because his dental hygiene, his tooth decay was kind of been impacted. And as most probably as any kind of good researcher kind of went away and kind of thought, is there a way of kind of creating some form of sports drink or sports gel that we allow athletes to kind of still consume large quantities of carbohydrates, but not have this kind of impact on like the dental animal and just almost like tooth decay. And because he's a researcher within kind of like cancer research, and he worked kind of in the past with this form of like hydrogel technology, and he thought if there's a way of kind of harnessing that, would that be allow it to to be able to kind of deliver the carbohydrates a little bit more effectively and kind of mitigate these kind of dental impacts. And from there they had a kind of a quick concept, and what they found quite quickly from that is that not only does it mitigate some of the dental impact, but also it mitigates a lot of the GI issues. It's able to kind of deliver the carbohydrates a lot more effectively. And what's crazy is the first group of athletes that ever tested it was for the sub 2 project, which was before the night breaking 2 project. There was a project called the sub 2, and it was kind of led by this research called like Yannis Pistalis, and he his idea was very to get like the first athlete to run the first sub 2 hour marathon, but in kind of normal conditions, not in like an artificial kind of setting. And the athletes that were on that at the time were Kennebeesa Bekele, Wilson Kipsang, and they were very much like the first athletes to kind of test the concept. And once they kind of like tested it at the time, Kennebeesa Bekele was really struggling with that transition from going from the track to the road, and the big component of it was the kind of his fueling. He was really struggling to take anything on, even water, and very instantly he from just having the hydrogel technology, he was able to kind of consume really aggressive amounts of carbohydrates. And from there, it kind of just spread a little bit like wildfire. Like, you know, athletes, they all kind of talk amongst each other, and it just grew bigger and bigger. And it got to the point where like Eliud Kipchoge used it during the Breaking 2 event, which at the time Maurten didn't have any affiliation or wasn't even aware. It was only till afterwards, and then they got involved in the INEOS project. And and very much I think since 2017, Maurten has gone on to fuel every world major marathon winner, both male and female, every world marathon, every world Olympic and Olympic marathon winner, both male and female, and world champion. So there's a massive kind of rich kind of support kind of in athletes kind of using the products. And I think a lot of it just kind of comes down to how the hydrogel technology kind of functions and deliver the carbohydrates. It's one of maybe the only forms where athletes can have a really aggressive carbohydrate intake without having it compromising the performance. So yeah, that's kind of how Maurten kind of came about.
Mate, it's that's interesting actually. Didn't know about the sort of working with Bekele and Kipsang in those early days. You're certainly dominating the market. So what makes hydrogel so special? And am I right in thinking you've got a patent on the hydrogel tech?
Yeah. So yeah, it's patented. So as I said, the technology actually, hydrogel technology, isn't new. It was developed in like the 1980s within the medical industry, and it's classified as like a drug delivery system. And what Maurten has been able to do is kind of use that technology, but implement it within a sporting application. And kind of how it works is like when you ingest, say, a drink or a drink mix or a gel, when it enters the gastric environment of the stomach, it's really acidic. And what happens there is it kind of creates a kind of chemical reaction. And the hydrogel kind of creates this three-dimensional structure around the carbohydrates. And with that, what it does is it alleviates kind of that gravitational load. Like you don't get that sweltering around. So it just feels like a little bit lighter. But then the big element is that it improves like gastric emptying. So it spends less time in the stomach, and it is able to kind of be transported into the small intestines at a quicker rate. And once it kind of goes into the small intestines, because the hydrogel technology is pH sensitive and the small intestines is it's less acidic, the hydrogel is then designed to kind of degrade and release the carbohydrates where it's then absorbed and utilized. And and that's kind of why a lot of, say, like the Kenyans and athletes, they call it like the disappearing drink, and that's because it very much, once you kind of ingest it, it creates this three-dimensional kind of semi-structured or colloid structure. So it kind of stops that sweltering around. It then bypasses into the small intestines, and it's allowed to be kind of absorbed. And there's kind of research there kind of showing both the increase in gastric emptying. We've got MRI studies looking at kind of the functionality, and then also there's a couple of bit of research paper looking at the performance benefits it can cause. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of how it works.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, obviously you see a lot of these brands going out there and making these sort of claims. But when you speak to people kind of in and around the circuit, and not just Maurten sponsored athletes, I would say that's the kind of feedback you get, is that actually it sits in the stomach a lot better than a normal gel.
Yeah, and again, it's the technology behind it is completely different. It's utilizing the hydrogel technology, so it's not like a traditional sports drink. And very much a lot of the traditional sports drinks, they're very similar. They have relatively the same ingredients and the same kind of functionalities, whereas the hydrogel kind of functions and delivers the carbohydrates in a little bit more of a different way to a traditional sports drink. So that's kind of why, a lot of athletes kind of tend to choose to use it. And yeah, that's one of the reasons, why we've patented the technology. It's successful, and the biggest thing really is the production of it. It's a really complex product to make. It has a completely different kind of production process compared to, say, a traditional sports drink. So that's another reason why we kind of had to look to kind of like patent the technology as well.
Mm. I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk about regarding the gel as well, the kind of glucose and fructose mix. Again, that's something which is relatively new in fueling.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of research, say, from the early 2000s, from a lot of good academics, that kind of showed that utilizing like multiple transportable carbohydrates. So for example, like glucose uses one selected kind of transporter and fructose uses an alternative one. So if you just purely had something like maltodextrin or fructose and had, say, 90 grams of carbohydrates in just glucose or maltodextrin, then you'd most probably, like, you'd oversaturate them transporters. So the body wouldn't be able to kind of transport or utilize all of that carbohydrate that you're ingesting. Whereas by using multiple transportable carbohydrates, so like fructose, it uses a different kind of transporter, which then allows the kind of fructose to be transported through the portal vein and be kind of utilized in a different aspect. So what it means that if you're going to ingest 90 grams of that, you're not oversaturating them transporters, so it just allows more effective delivery of like the carbohydrates. And that's, again, from like the early 2004s when that research started to come out. It's been a big trend, and I think now we're in a point where we've definitely refined like what types of carbohydrates you need, the dosages, and the frequencies of that, so, and the ratios as well. So and we use a combination of different ratios in both our drink mixes to our gels, and it's just so it can deliver the carbohydrates in a different capacity.
Mm. Yeah, that's obviously your kind of the flagship products are the gels and the mixes, and you obviously know a lot about those products. But Josh, like, what's your background and how did you end up working for Maurten?
So my background is I worked at university as a researcher. I did my PhD, and pretty selfishly, actually. I was a runner myself, and it was at the point around 2015 where I was training for the marathon, and as I was looking at the research and kind of what research was advising for, say, a lot of athletes to have from a, say, carbohydrate intake during the marathon, and also just from a training capacity. And what I found is there's a massive discrepancy within what was recommended in the research to what actually athletes were having in the real world. And I thought if there's a way of maybe kind of looking in to see if there's a reason for that. And this is very much, say pre-2016, the recommendations was very much that athletes should have a really high carbohydrate intake, be quite aggressive with the carbohydrates, But the issue with that, especially from an aspect of running, it causes significant kind of GI issues. So there was this bit of like paradox in the sense of, yes, carbohydrates could improve the performance, but also they could have like a negative impact on the performance. So a big aspect of my PhD was kind of looking into kind of these issues and seeing if there's a ways to kind of get around it. And after I did 3 or 4 studies, my kind of PhD thesis was very much kind of showing that, similar to kind of what the research was like, yes, carbohydrates are essential, but based on the current research, a lot of the research, what's been previously done, is very much like utilized cycling and extrapolated that data to running. So it meant it was not really as applicable for runners. And what my research just kind of like, it just highlighted a little bit is that, yes, carbohydrates are important, but the GI issues are far significant in runners compared to cyclists. And we see this all the time. Like, cyclists can easily consume larger carbohydrate intakes, and both say on the bike and same for like triathletes. But when it comes to the run, it's a little bit more complex. And it was around about 2016 or 2017 where I was about to kind of do my kind of remaining study, where I was going to see if I could either implement a training gut trainability study to see if athletes could still have these bigger carbohydrate intakes, but without getting the GI issues. But then, as I was kind of filing through all the ethics and going through the process, it was the Night Breaking 2 project, and it was just like seeing kind of Kipchoge, and he was having these drinks, and after having a little look around, I found out that they was using this drink called like Maurten, and looked on the website, and they had a really small website at the time, and they kind of had these kind of claims of like what the hydrogel technology could do. It could deliver the carbohydrates more effectively. It could reduce GI issues, and it was very much like the holy grail at the time, and especially for my research. And I kind of reached out to them and kind of said, I'm looking to do some research and want to kind of get a good understanding of the product and kind of how they developed it, because what I needed to do is kind of create my own hydrogel product to help kind of validate it, so it's kind of independent. And at the time, because they was going through the whole kind of patent application, they kind of just told me politely to kind of get lost. They're already kind of working with a lot of universities, and so I very much kind of went away and developed my kind of own hydrogel utilizing the framework of what they had. So it took me about 9 months to do. And I replicated almost similar kind of studies what I did in my PhD, and quite clearly what it showed is that when comparing a traditional kind of carbohydrate drink to a hydrogel drink, there is a significant reduction in GI issues. So athletes were able to comfortably ingest these high carbohydrate intakes, what the research was recommending, without getting the GI issues. But then what it also started to show is that the carbohydrate oxidation efficiency increased. So it meant like the body was utilizing more of that carbohydrate it was ingested with the hydrogel technology. And what this kind of very much led to is like an improvement in performance. And it showed that compared to a traditional sports drink, that the ingestion of the hydrogel improved performance by 2.1%. And when I kind of published that research, it kind of it got a little bit kind of crazy for myself, because a lot of kind of nutrition companies kind of reached out to see if I could replicate the technology and maybe kind of like join the team in terms of their product development. And it was only when Maurten kind of reached out and just said, invited me to the offices, and well, firstly like congratulated me on the paper, and invited me to the offices, and from there they kind of just offered me a job. They kind of showed me the plans that they had, what they was currently working on, and the plans they had like in the future, and it was a bit of a no-brainer. And the big thing is that they had the patented technology as well. So, but it was a no-brainer to join the team after kind of seeing the plans they have. It was a right move for me, I think.
So they were just super impressed that you'd gone away and you'd been able to basically make the same product they were producing.
Yeah, most probably. Yeah. I was most probably just persistent and being a little bit annoying, but yeah, I think they have a really small, we have a really small like R&D department, and I think they was most probably just looking for a little bit more help, and just someone to kind of join the team who's has a similar kind of maybe kind of research and insights, and can complement the team, and it was kind of really the right fit.
So then currently, like, break down your role a little bit at Maurten, and you probably can't talk about what you're currently researching, but you're always, I presume you're always a little bit ahead of the game.
Yeah, so my role is it changes on a day-to-day basis, but I'm classed as a performance scientist, but I kind of very much kind of head up the innovations and early product development projects. So I do a lot of work with within the R&D team in terms of like from the chemistry formulation work to product testing and development, and then also work quite really closely with a lot of athletes. So it's a yeah, it's a pretty much a dream job. Get to do a lot of traveling, go to a lot of camps, meet with a lot of athletes, collect a lot of data, and get to kind of test and push the boundaries of the research. Like for Maurten, we very much class ourselves as a research company, not really a science company. And although they might sound similar, there's almost quite nuanced differences in the sense of like if you're say a science company, you very much look at what science is available in the research, and then you'll kind of develop products around that kind of science and that literature. Whereas for Maurten, we look at the science that's available, but then we do a lot of internal kind of R&D research. We invest a lot, and the idea then is to really try and push the boundaries and see kind of what kind of new avenues we can go within the sport. And that's kind of where like Maurten, we kind of specialize in understanding understanding almost like what the athletes needs and how to kind of develop products around that. And we're very much, especially when it comes to some of like the products we've developed, the data we have, I'd say we're very advanced in terms of from the research that's kind of currently been published. It's very similar to elite sport. They always say like athletes are always like 5 or 10 years ahead of like the academic research, and that's kind of like where we're in that space. We're very much very a couple of years ahead of the academic research, but we also have the scientific evidence to kind of back that up. And how we kind of get that is working really closely with the athletes. We have a lot of good organizations we have good partnerships with, but it's we have a good model where we go out in the field, do a lot of testing, and really spend a lot of time with the athletes and understand both what their needs are and how their body's kind of responding to training. And that's kind of how we work. And people very much see Maurten as almost like as a nutrition company, but we we class ourselves as very much like a biotech company, and that very much then means we're not bound by just looking at ways to improve athletes' performance just purely from nutrition kind of interventions. We do a lot of other work and seeing how we can improve athletes' performance in different avenues as well. And that's kind of what I work on currently at the minute.
Yeah, and looking at some of your products, obviously you mentioned the gels and the drinks earlier, and we've seen kind of the introduction of things like the bicarb and also the bar as well. How much of some of those products changed? Like take the gel for instance, how much has that changed since it was first kind of hit the shelves?
They do change. That's a good question. So we very much like if you look at our roster of kind of products, they're very minimal. But the idea there is like we only develop products that are going to improve the athlete's performance or health. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of resources on kind of improving the products. And if we look at both, say, the gels and drink mixes, they've evolved over the years. Like we've improved our efficiency of the manufacturing to the point on also the efficiency of the ingredients. And actually later this year, we'll have a launch of one of the products where we'll do a big, huge update. And that's kind of very much to improve, again, both the quality of the product, but then also the efficiency of it as well. So we spend a lot of time developing the products. If you take say for the bicarb, it took 2.5 years to develop, and we could have most probably launched it within the first year. But what we try to do is make sure we have sufficient amount of data to kind of back the product up, and also make sure that it works and it's good for the athletes. So what we did there is we wanted to kind of test that it would work both in an athletic season and then also kind of like during a kind of an athletic build-up, which is then when you kind of test it and then in that kind of time scale, it takes maybe a year to kind of get a good amount of quality data. But that's kind of just how Maurten works. Is we're very much a data-driven company and want to make sure that whatever products we produce, they do have scientific data to back it up. And either they're there to improve the athlete's performance or health, because we want to do right by both the athletes and the consumers as well. We don't want to kind of mislead and just like produce a product just for sake of producing a product. Like we could produce loads of products tomorrow that don't have any scientific evidence, and we know they would most probably do very well, but that would most probably it muddies the water in the sense of like the nutrition field, which is already a really complex environment, but then also it just doesn't do justice by the athletes or the consumers. So that's kind of how it works.
And just quickly before we sort of move on to asking you about the bicarb, I just wanted to ask about fueling. Obviously, Maurten's had a big effect in the marathon, and we've seen times come crashing down. But from a track and field perspective, from a kind of 5K, 1500 perspective, how important is carb intake? Is there gains to be had? Yeah, for 1500 runner.
I think in terms of most probably the race itself, like the body's going to have a sufficient amount of glycogen stores to kind of support the energy required for that. But when it comes to training, that's the big kind of difference. And we've definitely seen in the last couple of years, there's been a big change in kind of how athletes are kind of fueling in and around their training. And that, again, is the whole purpose of training is very much to kind of create a training stimulus. And then from there, you allow your body to adapt to that training stimulus. And if body doesn't have any energy, then if you go into the session with limited energy available, you won't be able to kind of create a sufficient amount of stimulus. But then if you kind of don't fuel appropriately during or post that session, then your body won't be able to adapt or absorb that training stimulus. So I think has been a really good shift now where athletes know that they need to have a continuous maintenance of energy to not only just like complement the training, but then also complement the absorption of that adaptation. And I think that's where we're seeing these kind of like times like coming down. If we kind of go back to say the marathon, that's there's been, like you say, since like 2017, there's been a significant difference in the times that like athletes are running now. And we can correlate a lot of it could be related to say the shoes in terms of like the carbon shoes in terms of helping kind of improve running economy and kind of the mechanical load, but a big factor is very much down to kind of the delivery of carbohydrates. And I think for Maurten, we kind of came out at the same time as the carbon shoes, and we was a very small company at the time, had a very small budget, and we most probably just got drowned out by that kind of the market from that perspective. But I think if you speak to a lot of elite athletes, they really respect kind of the work that Maurten's has done, and they understand that some of a large portion of the significant performance gains have come from the change in technology and the way carbohydrates have been delivered.
Yeah, let's chat about that bicarb then. What's kind of the difference between the bicarb and the other products you have on offer?
So the bicarb is, well, our other products are very much centered around kind of delivering carbohydrates, delivering kind of fuel. Whereas the bicarb is, and if I talk about the other products that before, they've always been kind of dedicated to say, we have this class called performance endurance triangle, and that's very much like cycling, running, and triathlon. And then products really kind of fit within that like domain. But they're very much within kind of the endurance realm, where it's events where you need to kind of, or you're required to have carbohydrates or you're required to fuel to kind of maintain kind of work output during an endurance event. Whereas the bicarb is very much more for both for not only just these endurance athletes, but also for the power-based athletes. And the idea of the ingesting sodium bicarb is it's allowed to kind of regulate the acid-base balance and make a more kind of stable environment. So it allows athletes to kind of produce a great amount of output or continue to work for a more prolonged period of time. And the actual bicarb itself, it's not new. Like there's like 40 years worth of research showing that ingestion of sodium bicarb can improve athletes' performance. But the issue with that is the GI issues that come with it. like we know there's GI issues when you're likely going to ingest, say, carbohydrates. But when you ingest sodium bicarb, the GI issues are far significant, and that's because sodium bicarb is a it's a regulator, so it's designed to when combined with an acidic environment, it kind of buffers the kind of the acidity. So when you ingest sodium bicarb, as soon as it enters the acidic environment of the stomach, it's then will naturally start to kind of buffer that environment. And when it's buffering, it means like it's reducing that it's increasing the pH and reducing the acidosis. So it means the athletes will then start to like burp to kind of as an output of like CO2. Or if the pH environment has changed too much, the only way the body can really eliminate it is by being sick or bypassing to the colon as diarrhea. And that's kind of like the history of sodium bicarb, is that the research has shown that it can improve the performance, but the GI issues are just far significant, and that's it. And what that's really led is the athletes have had to almost take a bit of a gamble when using it. They've either like it could work in terms of improving the performance, or it could also have a massive impact. And that's kind of where with the hydrogel technology, we've really just tried to kind of mitigate the negative associations of the bicarb and purely give the performance benefits. And that's like really what we've done, is we've tried to deliver the carbohydrates utilizing the hydrogel technology in a more effective way, so then it can be absorbed and bypass the kind of the effects of having a negative issue or the GI issues, and then allow the athletes to get the performance benefits. But most probably to say in terms of how it works is most probably when you're working at a really high intensity, as a byproduct of that high intensity exercise, your body produces lactate. We all know that lactate kind of increases, but actually what impairs like the actual performance or restricts the muscles from contracting is not the lactate itself, it's the production of hydrogen ions. So people always really associate like lactate as like the enemy, but it's actually the production of hydrogen ions. And what it means is when the body's working anaerobically, it's the muscles are producing these large quantities of hydrogen ions, and when they get to a certain point and create a massive disturbance in the acid-base balance, the body will naturally start to protect itself. And that's when you might hear like Steve Cram on the commentary saying the swimming lactate at the final 150 meters of an 800-meter race. And it's not the lactate itself, it's the increase in hydrogen ions. The reason why there's a greater increase in lactate is because the hydrogen ions bind with the lactate, and the body will naturally kind of buffer them hydrogen ions. But what you can do is by ingesting sodium bicarb, because it's a buffer, once you've increased your plasma blood bicarbonate levels, it means you've got greater potential to buffer them hydrogen ions. So as the athletes are working at a high intensity, the ingested sodium bicarbonate is buffering them hydrogen ions, so it's allowing the athletes to continue to work at either producing a higher power output or allowing them to kind of go for a more prolonged period of time. Yeah, that's kind of how it works.
If athletes get too used to using bicarb, one of the things that Maurten suggested, using it in training as well. If they get too used to using it, will that kind of reduce their ability to cope with lactic and actually, clear it themselves and shuttle it?
It's a really good point. And that's like the research we're kind of currently investigating at the minute. But at the minute, that's not the case from the data we have. What it's actually doing is when you ingest like the sodium bicarb, it's just giving the body greater potential to kind of do more work. And there's almost what we're seeing is within training, there's two use cases of using the bicarb system. If you want to create a really work really anaerobically and create this really big training stimulus, then what the ingestion of the bicarb does is it allows the athlete to kind of push beyond what they would most probably normally be physically able to do. And you think of it as almost like a car, like a car naturally might have like the red of the revs is like between like 8,000 and 10,000 revs, and kind of once you kind of spend a sufficient amount of time in that period, the engine will combust. Whereas with the ingestion sodium bicarb, it kind of increases that rev count from 8 to say 14,000. So it means the athletes can spend more time in that red zone without combusting. And the issue with that kind of like training, you just need to take into account the recovery is a big element. Because you've created such a big training stimulus, you need to allow the body to adapt and really recover from that training. But then there's also the other avenue of utilizing the bicarb, and it's very much like, say, within this, especially within the trend of like threshold training where people are doing double threshold sessions. The idea of that training is to kind of allow the body to kind of produce mitochondria and create a good environment. And the way that kind of works is by keeping the acid base balance, or keeping the lactate in a controlled state. And with the ingestion of bicarb, what it means there is it's not about kind of running quicker during them sessions. It's about kind of improving the quality of work and maybe allowing to do more work. And what that means is, because the ingestion sodium bicarb does is it regulates the acid base balance. So it means the athletes will be able to execute the sessions maybe a lot more effectively, but then the perception effort will be reduced. And also they're giving the body more potential to a better environment for the mitochondrial production. So that's a big avenue we're kind of currently researching in the minute, is to kind of see the effects. And the difficulty is like with the bicarb is you most probably wouldn't see the effects or the performance gains from just doing it, say, once or twice. It needs almost like a 6 to 8 week kind of training period to get that compound effect. So that's the difficulty in the sense of that the implementation of utilizing the bicarb is you first need to understand what session you're going to use it for. If it's for that really high anaerobic sessions, then it can be used for in that capacity. You just need to kind of look at the recovery. Or if it's within that kind of threshold model, then you just need to understand that it's not about almost running quicker, but it's improving the quality of kind of the work and maybe spending more minutes at threshold. And if you can increase each of the reps or the session by, say, an extra 5 minutes within that threshold zone over, say, a 6 to 8 week period, that compound effect will be far greater. But in terms of like the effects, it's not like caffeine where you have too much, it'll the performance gains will reduce. It doesn't really work in that sense. So it's not like if you have too much of it, then it won't work on race day. That's from the data we have. But it's about using it in the right time. So it's not about using it for every session, like just going for an easy run. It's not needed from that capacity. It's more just for the kind of key kind of workouts you have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Obviously, could give a lot better explanation than we can, and that's really helpful, I think, for some of our listeners. Just before we finish up, is there anything like, I guess, what would your kind of like main point about like Maurten products be? I guess you've covered a few there in terms of like the way in which you use it. What would be your main advice for people like wanting to try the products?
I'd say one thing is to try. Like, I think a lot of people really associate Maurten as for the elites, but as we all know, like everyone can be exposed to getting GI issues. So it's in that instance, it's a product not just for the elite athletes. And I think that's one thing. And I think another thing is just getting used to it. There is as you say, the gels, they have most probably a different texture to a typical kind of sports gel. So I think there's definitely I think for some people, they just need to kind of, give it a try and see. But yeah, I think that's my very much the only recommendation I have.
Thanks very much for chatting to us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Great to hear from Josh there, chatting about Maurten and some of its benefits. Really interesting, wasn't it, Matt? Just to kind of hear about the innovation behind the product, because I think Maurten's probably one that whilst it's like super used, widely used by the top of the top and also sub elites. Like I'm someone who's like not even calling myself a sub elite, someone who's used it myself, like quite a lot, trying to run kind of like some half marathon sessions, etc. But it also is a product that is criticized for being kind of like heavy on the marketing and also a bit expensive at times, isn't it, mate? But interesting to hear from him about the actual science behind it and how it is different from some of those other carb products out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what they do, there is a reason why it's expensive. And when you do speak to athletes, it is the best in the game, I think. And I think you can say that from experience. I think I can as well. And it's funny, even that story about the best athletes were using, their like brandless package that they released. And athletes who had sponsors elsewhere were using Maurten. And so, I think they are at a level, unfortunately, where they can price up, and it's actually quite scary because I think their premium gel now, I think they've got a new gel out, their premium endurance gel, is I think it's £5 a gel, which is just like 50 quid for a box of 10 or something, which is yeah, quite scary. But maybe after listening to Josh, you're like, wait, well worth the money. But I think the big thing for me is like the gels as well. But my interest was really in the kind of bicarb and the impact that that's going to have over the next few years. And at a sub-elite level, I feel like it's already had that impact over the elites. And I don't want to start any rumors here, but I'm pretty sure like they've been sort of I've heard rumors about Jakob kind of delaying what Maurten can kind of release and use, because I think they've done some testing with him over the years, and stuff as well.
Yeah, it is crazy, and it's I don't know. I would almost love to see athletics go down like the Formula One style route with like I don't know, say like you got a team that's like a Nike team, and then they've got Maurten on board, and then versus like Adidas who have like Red Bull on board, for example, and they're just purely like going into like channel like their two best athletes, and just going like all techie on it. I do think it would be pretty cool. And we almost are doing that, aren't we? But like you say, it's very shared, all that, or it should
I
be
think,
shared.
mate, I
But
think rightly so as well. I think rightly so.
yeah,
I would hate that. Um,
no, I'm not saying
to
it'd
be
be
honest.
good for the athletes, but I think as a spectator, I think it'd be pretty cool to see that sort of thing. Like you see in the Tour de France, like everyone has their own sports science team. So whilst the products are available, like the kind of the sports science team that are working out, because it's not just having access to Maurten, it's having access to people like Josh, like the researchers who are able to tell you exactly how much you need for you and your body. It's not just having the product, like
Yeah.
the product's there for me and you to use, but it doesn't mean we're using the exact right amount of carb per like for our weight, for our training, etc. So that's what's kind of gives you the edge, doesn't it? And I think people like the On Group are doing that
Yeah.
massively. Like the science, it seems like that we're obviously on the outside of this, like we hear rumors and stuff, but it seems like they're doing their athletes. It's how Salazar got. Obviously, say what you want about Salazar, but how he got Rupp and Mo like to the top of the world was kind of going all in on that sports science, and now it's happening a bit more broadly, bit more kind of across the world, and with lots of different groups. But that was a group that were really kind of at the cutting edge of it. What probably they started like 18 years
Mhm.
ago now, doing that sort of thing.
Mm. Yeah. All this considered, I am still on the side of the fence, which is like, if you're not fit enough, like, don't fuss over taking this stuff.
I mean,
Like,
I think I agree with that to an extent. Maybe unless you're doing a marathon, in
look,
the short
the fueling
events,
in a marathon is massive, right?
yeah.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. But
But you
I
could
think
probably get
just,
away with one or two gels.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you don't need to be like trying to. I don't know. I don't know why we're talking about it. We've just had an expert on to talk about it, so we don't need to give you guys advice.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
So, but yeah, no, it's super interesting, and we learned a lot, as well. Well, I did anyway, Matt. So
As always, man. As always. Should we dive into the big race, which is coming up next week, the pre-classic, which basically we just call like I mean, I just think this is a warm up to this is basically Olympic finals, isn't it? Looking at some of the fields,
Mm.
I think there will be some surprises in Olympic finals, obviously. But actually, let's get the first story out of the way. Kenya announcing that they're going to do their 10K champs in at the pre-Diamond League. They've had issues in the past. I remember Paul Koech was I remember in 2012 Paul Koech was running like 755, 754 in like the Doha Diamond League, like all these early Diamond Leagues, and in the steeple. But because the Kenyan trials at altitude, he just sucked at altitude. Like he just, even though he was from there, lived there, trained there, whatever, he just couldn't perform, and he would never get selected. And so I do, and I think, their Kenyan trials at altitude do throw up some weird results. Obviously they're going to have the main trials in Kenya still, but putting the 10K on in Eugene, it's Ethiopia do it as well, don't they? They have their trials in their 10K trials in Hengelo usually,
Yeah.
um, and so I can kind of understand it because again the Olympics is at sea level and it is about how you perform at sea level. Really, I do think it does throw up some weird results.
Yeah, yeah,
But if you're an
absolutely.
athlete, it sucks. And if you're an athlete who obviously doesn't have the right agent and can't afford to go over there, it does suck. And almost everyone should have, I guess, a fair opportunity at qualifying, and that's what they've taken away from a few.
Yeah, 100%. And it sounds like they've not had much more notice than we have with it as well, which obviously it is a bit different. Like you talk about preparing for a race, like you could bank on actually, I'm just going to make sure I'm the best altitude 10K runner in my nation and do all your race prep for that rather than just trying to get in the best shape. Obviously, it's very similar, but at that level, there is kind of fine margins with that, and it sounds like they've not had much notice as well that the trials are going to be over there. So, I mean, for us as
Yeah, I want.
spectators, I think
Yeah,
it's brilliant, but yeah, maybe for the athletes, maybe not.
yeah. I was gonna say. I also wonder like how much of it is like, I don't know. There must be some sort of perks from them hosting their 10K champs in Eugene. So maybe there is some financial benefit. Maybe Nike have got involved and want to put this 10K on. I don't know, but it seems like I don't think they just do that out of the blue because I think obviously they have to get clearance from the meet directors and stuff as well. So I think there's probably a lot more to that story.
Yeah, we should host our men's 1500 in Monaco.
I mean, if British athletics pulled any stunt like that, it would cause uproar. But yeah, um,
Would be
but
interesting.
let's move on. Let's move on because, like I said, pre-classic it is a week away. Well, just over a week away now. Unfortunately, we don't have. I guess all the start lists aren't complete. I mean, didn't the meet come out and announce Kipyegon in the 5K? But actually, that field hasn't even been released yet, and it's later come out that she's had a little injury and she's not going to run the 5K and she's just going to prepare for the Kenya champs. So
Mm.
Kipyegon, maybe not her best day this year, maybe vulnerable, especially when you look at some of the 15 women right now. But we'll start with the women's 8 lum because you've got world indoor champ Daguma, you've got Hodgkinson, you've got Mary Mora, and you got Athing Mu, and you got like Riki Rogers, Nakai what was she like 20 medalists in 2019 world champs or so, but the field is just sickeningly good. If anything, maybe just too many good people.
Mm. Perhaps, but
Like
then
it's going to
maybe
be an
that
eight
makes
field with
it.
12 in or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. It is mouthwatering though, isn't it? Like, and like you say, it's almost the dress rehearsal for the Olympic Games. What I would say though is, I do almost think there's obviously massive benefits of being the one that comes away as the winner in this, but I also think you're then the one that's there to be shot at come come the Olympics, and we've seen it before. Like I think it depends on the character. I think it depends on the athlete. I think we saw it with Keely a couple years ago, where she was just winning, 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 and then obviously when anything a bit different came along, it was I don't think she knew what to do. So who
Yeah, I
knows? Who
think that
knows?
was
Yeah.
yeah. that was potentially a bit of an unfair time because like she was just winning on the circuit, but she wasn't racing Lou. She wasn't,
True.
I think she only beat Moore a couple times in that case. But yeah, I think actually, yeah, you're almost better off. You're better off, aren't you? If you sort of
Depends who
just
you are, doesn't it? It
yeah.
completely depends, like what type of athlete you are. Like some people are gonna, like Josh Kerr, for example. We'll get onto that later. But if Josh Kerr wins, he's then that's the best thing for him, you know. But so,
Well,
nah, I
I
think
would
so.
disagree.
I think Kerr, absolute best thing for him.
So we'll just
Whereas
wrap this up.
Jakob, say Jakob loses a race, that's good for that guy.
Well, that's what I mean. I think if Jakob loses, it's better for Jakob. And
Mm.
you say it's good for Kerr, but I think it then makes Jakob a little bit more dangerous. So yeah, we'll see.
We'll
But
get into that. We'll get
you
into
know,
that. This women's 800 though, mate, who's going to take it? Like, is a thing Moo going to start? She's on the
I'm just
start
ex
list. Is she going to run though?
yeah, it's true, man. I mean, Sydney McLaughlin's already pulling out of meets, but I'm probably most interested to see this Daguma run against the world-class
Mm.
talent, to be honest with you. So I think I can't really call it. But I'm really excited to see how Daguma fares against Mora Moo and Hodgkinson and kind of I guess just how that race takes place. So it's going to be special. Next Saturday, women's 15. Quickly move on, mate. We got Georgia Bell in there, Laura Muir and Katie Snowden, and we've got world champ St. Perrier, who I thought her performance at Worlds in the 2000 was just out of this world. And you've got a whole heap of Ethiopians, Jess Hull as well. So I think that's, oh God, comfortably a 354 race, 353 race on the front. I think we're going to see a lot of women break four there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you mentioned, Georgia Bell, someone that we've seen do so well. Maybe look, she started off with 403 in the outdoors. Obviously a first full season back, but this is her first chance, I think, in a really world class field. So it's going to be interesting to see how she goes. Kind of transitioning from, like we said, she's had so many great experiences winning those races, but now she's kind of proven she deserves to be in with a shop in the big ones, in with a shot in the big ones. Sorry, but yeah, be really interesting to see how she goes. And obviously, like it's a weird one for these British women because and all the British athletes in the yeah, you might kind of be first Brit, second Brit in some of these races. British champs then is a whole different race.
Oh, mate. Yeah. But I think for her, the biggest thing is just she just boxing off that Olympic standard, man, isn't it? Like that's what she needs to go do. Sorry, box off the uh just sort of I guess that monkey on her back of four flat as well. So
Mm.
I think she'll be fine. But that's pretty much it. I'm just casting my eyes over steeple women as well. You kind of put me on the spot there, Lum. But yeah,
Sorry,
no
mate.
Brits. It's all right, mate. It's
Do
all
you need
right.
some more prep time next week?
No, I was just analyzing because there seems to be a whole host of women's events, but very few men's events, distance events at pre-classic.
Yeah.
I mean, the mile is absolutely stacked.
Oh,
Um,
it's ridiculous, isn't it? Like let's go through
so
this field because you know sometimes like you see these big races and there's a few names on there that you're like, oh, okay, they've done well to get on there, but it it is always good. Bauman Mile, we've got Geordie Beamish, Centro, Chariot, Mario Garcia, Gurma, Gawley, Ollie Hoare, Cole Hocker, Jakob, Kerr, Hobbs Kessler, Kipsang, Cam Myers, Nagoose, and Jake Wyman.
yeah,
That is
Jesus.
ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Look, and I guess is the interest for me is going to be. I mean, actually, I'm quite looking forward to Cole Hocker, to see how he shapes up this season. But the interest for us as Brits is Gawley, isn't it? It's Gawley and Whiteman. We've seen Whiteman in Australia. We saw him indoors a little bit as well. So we saw him earlier parts. So how's he shaping up going into this race and kind of, yeah, how will he perform? Because I think then we can start getting excited about, if someone can contest that second spot at trials, at champs. But yeah, we expect Kerr to be at his best. He's in good form over 8. So we really expect him to kind of get on this. But yeah, I think Gawley and Whiteman are the interest for us to see how they're faring up.
Speak for yourself, mate. All I care about is Kerr and Jakob. Like this is.
I am actually. Do you know what? I'm actually surprised. I think Kerr's obviously got these. I think they've got a few matchups over the next few months. They've got a few head-to-heads, and I think they're that smart from kind of both their agents and PR companies or whatever to build the hype and the rivalry, and then maybe we'll have I guess a scorecard going into the Olympics where it's like 2 for 2 or something like that, or maybe one of them's 4-0 against the other one. But yeah, if I was, if you were one of them, like one's going to come out worse, isn't it, over these next few races?
Yeah, I just can't wait for that post race press conference as well, because whoever takes that
pre-race and post-race, get them both in the same room.
It's a bit unfair on Jakob, I think. I think Kerr smokes him in an MMA fight. So
yeah, man.
It's gonna be great.
Say that, but
each other. So
it's not just Kerr and Jakob. I know they are class part, but Lemaitre Germa has been on fire. See what he can do over the mile, and that Renault Chariot bloke, and Kip Sang, and yeah, too bad they haven't got that Coleman from the Doha Diamond League, because he looks the real deal as well. But and the Goose as well, Jesus. So I think there's enough men to actually get him. Beamish, oh god, yeah, just saying the whole field now. Mate, I don't think you can count Beamish out, but yeah, maybe he is.
I don't know. I think there's a few athletes you mentioned there who are quite overrated, to be honest.
Mate, the Goose did run 3:43 last year.
Compared to those two, no.
And that's the point. How quick will they run? Are we going to see a world record?
I mean, it's about time people ran quick in a mile, because mile times get massively overhyped compared to 1500-meter times.
Yeah, I guess like we do see like a 3. I mean, even like a 3:52, we're like, that's quick. But
yeah, we see 3:49, we're like, oh my god.
When you deep it, it's like a 3:49 is like what, a 3:34?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they would go through in. So they actually are faster than that. Don't forget they are running 109 meters further, mate. So
yeah, well,
it is a little bit further, so we've got to give them credit there. But yeah, we might see a world record. You never know. We might see a British record for Kerr. If he can run sub 3:46. Let's see. But that's it. That's it on the men's side. So I was almost like, and that's why you caught me off guard. So I was sort of browsing, like, what? Like, really? Is that it? So it's what we got to look forward to on the men's side is just about a mile.
Yeah. There will be, obviously, there's normally the night before distance.
Well, I think that's when those 10Ks are going to take place, mate.
Yeah, so it's technically not free classic, but there is always good races as well. Takes me back to the glory days when Farah used to rock out for a 5 or a 10.
Man.
The night before.
Well, literally, yeah, before the night of 10Ks came along, and that one in March in California, that was the only place you could get a good 10, and yeah, Farah, Rupp, Bakili, I remember, what was it, 2011 or something? Those boys just chonking around there, 26:46. So yeah, those were the days in the old Hayward Field, not the non-atmospheric Hayward Field, mate.
Oh, mate, it's like West Ham. It's all gone downhill.
My question is, will they sell it out? Because if they can't sell it out with these fields, then
it's not the home of track and field.
It's not the home of track and field, and there's no hope for the LA Olympics.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, that's pretty much all we're kind of, well, I'm sure there is some other races, but all we're focused on is the
Mate, there are loads. And I will say we're going to try and get a little bit, push out some Instagram posts wrapping up the sort of UK distance scene results, because next week is ridiculous. There's the almost European meet every single night. There's also the LA Grand Prix tomorrow night. A load of Brits are going to go run over there in the distance. So there's so many races over the next 7 days, and I think the next 2 or 3 weeks is going to be massive. Of course, you've got BMC Grand Prix as well in Sports City and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, the next 2 or 3 weeks in the world of UK distance running are going to be huge. Everyone's posting their times, getting qualifying marks, etc. And of course, that European window closes. European champs window closes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be here as always to kind of bring you all the information about all of that stuff over the coming few months, because track season's where it's at, isn't it? So like can't wait, to be honest. But as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys very soon.